The investigators at Internal Affairs do a phenomenal job of being thorough and being dedicated to finding out the facts, knowing the consequences.
There is times, not all the time, but there is occasions where that investigator makes that complainant feel devalued and they're being dehumanized, and they're actually feeling a certain way about, hey, this is what I believe where the officer did something wrong.
The traffic accident was kind of funny, just on a side note, is I'm driving, I'm working in North Hollywood, I'm working with a guy from New York. Immediately I'm like, hey, run the plate again, just double check. But the guy pulls over real quick and stops. So I stop behind him, offset, keeping my eyes on the car. I'm telling my partner, hey, run the plate again before we put anything out. Yeah. But I kick my door open because you want to be ready. And there goes a car. It's my door.
If that was me with my partner working again, hey, bro, run the plate.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? Run the plate.
Right.
And run it.
Yeah.
Until you get it right. Welcome back to Internal Affairs, a police podcast. Your host, Marlon Marachi, and Todd Bogart. Bogey, good buddy of mine. Thanks for coming, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
it's an honor to be here.
I'm going to start getting away from saying I have a special guest because everybody's special. I just thank each and every one of you for showing up and telling your stories. So, again, welcome, and we're going to get right to it, man. I know we're going to have a really good conversation, and let's go. The first question is, on a scale to 1 to 10, right, 10 being the highest, rate the importance of internal affairs in a police department and why?
It's a great question. It's kind of an oversimplification, though, if you ask me. I mean, 1 to 10. In modern police work, we don't work in a real linear fashion, right? So the way I would best explain the importance of internal affairs is in using like the idea of like a Venn diagram where you have overlapping areas of specialty or interest here. So in our organization, or my prior employer, the LA Police Department.
That's right.
We had three offices, operations, administrative, and then special operations. And in that center of that Venn diagram, where they all overlap, is really that service, that delivery of police services and public safety, right? So those three come together and make up the product to which we deliver our citizens, our stakeholders and constituents out there. And without and mutually exclusive, if each one of those little circles is operating by itself, it's ineffective, right? So that being said, internal affairs in the context of what it was designed for is a 10 out of 10 of importance, right? But it shares a responsibility of a bunch of other support entities, right?
Yes.
So it is very important. And in the spirit of why we have internal affairs, it is a 10 out of 10 for sure. So that's where I would place it.
I like it. I like that. You know what? You had me scared there for a second. I didn't think I was going to get a rating out of you. I mean, you are definitely very studious. Modern policing in a linear fashion, man. I'm going to have to step up my game with your explanations here, bro.
Well, think about that for a second, right? So going back
Let's think about that. I understand.
Back in the day when we had police work was delivered in a very linear fashion.
Yes.
You called the police, they came.
Yep.
Okay? Before there was an internal affairs, and even today, many organizations, smaller agencies don't have a designated internal affairs. Their supervisors will conduct their internal affairs investigations, right? So as we've evolved and as the Los Angeles Police Department really evolved as a front runner in proactive policing in the modern era, developing that specialty in internal affairs to address the complaints, concerns from both its constituents, its citizens, stakeholders, but also its employees within the organization, really developed into the most modern investigative internal affairs unit probably in the world.
100% agree with you, spot on. As I keep thinking about how you couch the linear fashion, right? You're absolutely correct. There is agencies, we can agree on this, where they're so small they outsource. They actually have to hire, a service, an investigative company to do the raise. And then there's agencies who, you're right, they're working patrol, they're working operations, or they're working some, mainly probably patrol, right? And then this ancillary duty is, hey, there's an internal affairs that you have to investigate. So I totally agree with you. Very good point about there is special ops, there's operations, and there's admin. I'm a true believer, and why I give it a 10 is because in any of those three departments, if you will, right, for the purposes of this explanation, something bad's going to happen. And probably some alleged misconduct is going to come out of it. And IA is going to be the one that's going to have to investigate it. So, yeah, it's super, super important. Let me ask you this, Bogey. What about question number 2? What's their job? What do you think an internal affairs investigator's job is? Considering, I know you didn't have worked internal affairs, but you've taken plenty of intakes, right? People who have made complaints, so you've had to.
Well, not just intakes, but done investigations.
Yes.
There are some divisions where we did the complete investigations. I know when I was a boot sergeant in Hollywood, I had several cases. I think probably 8 or 10 in the time I was there, full-on investigations. Mm-hmm. The role of the investigator within that piece of internal affairs is a fact finder, to investigate and provide all possible known facts regarding the allegations to present to an adjudicator. And in most cases, it's the commanding officer, and I think in all cases it's the commanding officer, and then up the chain through the different levels of review through the bureau and all the way up to the chief of police ultimately, right? If it's going to be sustained, but as the investigator, you're just there to investigate every loop and close that loop so that anybody looking at the case won't ask questions. As a watch commander, I sat in many times. I retired as a Sergeant 1. I was never an AWC, but probably sat in as an acting watch commander.
Correct.
Thousands of times. I mean, so reading reports, one of the worst things you can, let me rephrase that. One of the most frustrating aspects when reading an investigation.
One of the challenges.
Challenges, right, is to have these unknowns, right? So
Yes.
you ask the guys, hey, what is this? What are you doing here? What, did you go here? What about this person? And so as an IA investigator, you got to look at it from that perspective. And in all of my, and I learned this, through some great mentors at Hollywood, is to close all those loops. Ask yourself, can you answer your own questions? And then you can present that to your boss, and my lieutenant, or and then they could take it to the captain all the way up, and they say okay, we don't have any questions. And I knew as time went on, I got better and better because
Yes.
pretty soon they stopped kicking them back to me, and I knew I was answering all those questions.
You were doing better.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? And I think for the person who's watching and listening to this, you don't just become a really good IO, investigating officer, overnight. Yeah, it takes practice, like anything else, right? I mean, when I first started, same thing. I must have left a couple of loopholes, if you will, and all possible known facts. I like the way you say that because I got to really ask for your opinion, and this is the part where we've had this stigma for so long, and you can relate to this, about internal affairs, right? The dark side, the rat squad, et cetera, et cetera. In your opinion, do you feel that perhaps, not all the time, but perhaps there always isn't all known possible facts, or all the loopholes are not completely investigated.
Oh, yes, for sure.
And if I may, why do you think that is?
It's just it's human nature. We're infallible, man. We're going to make mistakes. There's always going to be that possibility of human error, right?
Yes.
And so we strive for, as professionals, to be as thorough as possible, but there's just always that inherent possibility. I almost said inevitability, because
Yeah.
it seems like there's always like something pops up somewhere down the line that, wow, how did I miss this, or where did that come from? But we do our best, and I think, to your point, the investigators at Internal Affairs do a phenomenal job of being thorough and being dedicated to finding out the facts, knowing the consequences if they don't.
Why do you think, and here's another question, I was just thinking about this, and you're probably my first guest to ask, is why do you think there is that stigma? You've been around 27 years. I retired with 24. I'm sure the stigma's been around probably since the 60s, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
It's a culture, like you said, going back to the 60s.
Yeah.
So there's a culture of distrust there. And
Very well said.
Yeah, and with a lack of education, and really with the personal willingness to accept everyone's role, you're still going to have that division, right? So that's the us and them, like these
Us
guys are
versus
out for
them.
them. But at the end of the day, like those guys were in the black and white with you maybe, a year ago,
Yeah.
or 2 years ago. So you have to put it into context of like, really, is this really what, an adversarial relationship? No, it's not. And I always welcomed these investigations because it's your chance to state your own case. Like, everybody deserves an explanation,
Correct.
right? And so when you go out and you are talking with someone who's detained on a radio call, an investigation, a lot of times that person wants to just tell their side of the story. And if you shut them off, or you build a wall, or give them the sense that they're not worth any the consideration for that, they feel devalued,
Of course.
and dehumanized, right? So,
yes.
So the same thing could be
Very
said,
well said.
with LAPD. If we have, just, hey, these guys come in, but it has to be on both sides. Like, going into the investigation, you got to be like, hey, whatever you got, what do you want to talk about?
Very good point, and I'm going to add more into that, because that's what when I teach this stuff, is what we call re-victimization. And what I mean by that is, when you first cut the face sheet, if you will, right? You're the intake, you're taking all this information, and then next thing you know, you forward that face sheet to an investigator. They're the ones who are going to be investigating. There is times, not all the time, but there is occasions where that investigator makes that complainant feel devalued, and they're being dehumanized, and they're actually feeling a certain way about, hey, this is what I believe, where the officer did something wrong. But the same thing happens on the other side of the table, right? You get get an IO. It can be someone from Internal Affairs, or even another sergeant that's got the case. That's the IO, and we start treating you as the accused as if you did something wrong, or your disposition, your approach, right? The way you deliver it makes them feel victimized by it.
Yes.
And we have to be, it's a fine line how to orchestrate questions and be friendly. Like you said, have a friendly attitude and say, hey, you know what? We're here to talk about this complaint. Please tell us, what happened, and I'm going to ask you a series of questions. But sometimes we don't do that. And I think, I was just thinking about this, I think that's where we actually get that stigma. along with the fact that we have a history of just a lot of corruption, right? Where we feel like, oh my God, these officers are rogue and they're doing something horrible. So let's get to the bottom of the truth, but this is how we're going to approach it. And then that approach is aggressive. It doesn't feel welcome, and it feels like you're guilty. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, and it's a fine line too, where those interrogation skills that you learned as a police officer back when you were a P1 in Foothill and throughout your career working in operations in the field, talking to suspects, you learned how to talk to them as a human being, right?
Right.
Or at least if you did, you were most effective. And I found through all my years of working in the field and speaking with people was talking to them in terms that they could understand, right? And so coming into an investigation, you're right. If some of these investigators, they believe that they're somehow self-righteous or more important than the person they're interviewing, it's going to come across. Walls are going to go up.
Yeah,
but if you come in and you're like, hey, we're here to have a conversation. We want to get everything out on the table. I see you have your rep with you or your attorney.
Yeah.
It's all good. Like, there's no surprises here.
Yes.
It takes down those barriers, and you're going to get a good interview. You're going to get an honest, transparent, like everything you want as an investigator, you're going to get if you come at that person from a human perspective.
1,000%, my friend. It's going to be our job as we sit here in this podcast, this platform, to inform how many sergeants in LAPD? Probably like how many? 800, maybe something.
Yeah, that's the last number I heard. I
so we got about 800 plus
yeah.
that should be listening and saying, "Hey, you know what? You get into this kind of business, be human about it, be kind, and be transparent." And then, of course, around state of California and whoever's listening in the nation, we just hope to get the message out to conduct yourselves in a certain way. It's not easy. I totally get that. Okay. Now, let's do it, man. Trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
Let me see. 27 years?
Yep, retired with just over 27 years.
How long ago?
I had to have a little medical procedure. So I started running time at the end of May.
Okay.
And then my last day was July 31st. August 1st, I was a civilian. So it's been...
the transition's been kind of...
the transition was good. Like, it's, you're at it for so long. I mean, you start thinking, you're really quantifying the amount of time you spend. Mm-hmm. And, I spent more time on LAPD than I did not, because I came on at 23, 24. I think actually I was 20. I think I was 24, like a week after my 24th birthday. So obviously 27 years I've been on longer than I've not been on LAPD. So you start to make these little adjustments, and I'm blessed with a really good circle of friends. I just have a good core group of guys from the department that are grounded, that have lives outside of LAPD, but also know how important that experiences that we shared over those decades at LAPD, you can't just dismiss that.
No.
People say, like, you got to have a life outside of this job. And it's true. But when this job is more than half your life, it does become a part of you.
100%.
And so you have to have that balance of connection with your past and those people that you've known for so long, and your new life outside of that as well. It's a balance.
That's right. And so, more sleep. More family time.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I've been retired for just over a year. It's the same thing, man. You know what? I wake up at 5, and for some reason I don't even need an alarm. I just wake up at 5, and sometimes it's 4, maybe it's 6 in the morning. And those days of, like, remember you have to rush. Oh, I gotta get to the station and get ready and get to roll call. It's so quick and so fast. Now you just kind of wake up and, you know what? I'm just gonna have a cup of coffee. And of course, I'm going to watch Dan Patrick, because that's what I do every morning. Okay, highlights. Let's see. Foothill. Definitely. You did your probation where?
I did my probation at Van Nuys Division.
Okay.
I wheeled to Foothill.
You wheeled to Foothill, and that's where we met.
Yeah.
So we've known each other since 1999. You can figure out how many years that would be. Probably 23, 24 years, if you will. Yeah. I was just fresh out of the academy, and what I can remember of you is just the same guy you are today, and definitely take that as a compliment because people change, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were always nice to me. You were cool. You had a very soothing sense of kind of carrying yourself, kind of kick back. I always pictured you like you were one of my surfing buddies that I saw at when I used to surf a lot when I was like 16, 17 years old. I used to surf a lot. That's all I ever did, just surf, work out, and go to clubs. And you reminded me of someone that I could run to the beach. Hey, bro. Hey, man, let's go out there. Let's catch some waves. And maybe you were the one that let me catch a really good wave.
Yeah.
Or if I snaked you, then complain. But anyway, that's a whole different story. You made sergeant in 2009, I believe.
Yes.
And you spent time in 77th?
Yep.
The mothership.
Yeah, that place was something else.
That's why they call it the mothership.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you ended up at Mission Division.
I did last couple of years. So I was at Mission. I was working for the patrol captain. I was working as an adjutant
Okay.
for the legendary Mike Odell.
Yeah. What was that like?
Amazing. I told him, hey, I just took the job because I want to hear about your stories from SWAT. Guy
He is
spent
a
28 years in SWAT
Yeah.
before he started promoting,
Yeah.
and ended up retiring as a captain. Just an amazing,
Yeah, he is.
an amazing officer,
Human being.
but human being. This guy is something else. So I was lucky enough to work with him. He brought me with him up to Mission when he transferred up there, which worked out because I'm from the Valley. At that time, I was living up in the Valley. So it was a win-win for everybody. Went to Mission and just spent my last 3 years there, and then just decided, it's time to pass the torch and get off, start the next chapter, whatever that may be.
Yeah, no, amen to that, man. We're healthy. We've got our families, and that's more important than anything.
Yeah.
Okay. It is an internal affairs police podcast, so let's get to it, man. Let's see. Were you a subject of a complaint investigation?
I was a couple. Yeah,
Of course,
I think.
if I may interject.
Sure.
That question to a lot of my guests, I don't think I'm going to get a guest that's going to say, no, I haven't,
Right.
including me. Right. I've been a subject. Not only have I prosecuted cops, I defended cops, but guess what? I was also accused. And it's not a good feeling, that's for sure. And of course, everything that we talk about, and we set this, I know you and I have had conversations where we just want to get some lessons learned and, how do you handle all this? And, I'll give you the floor, man. Tell me about this complaint and
Yeah,
what
well,
happened?
it's, to your point about lessons learned, I think really when you approached me about coming on the podcast, first of all, I think you're doing wonderful things.
Thank you.
With this podcast and with Savage Group and just I really admire you for what you're doing and going forward. And I want to bring a message of hope to the people that may see this in terms of how they see internal affairs. And so this story I'll tell you as a subject of a complaint. This is this is a funny story and kind of an innocuous complaint.
Mm-hmm.
I will preface this: in my 27 years, I had 3 sustained complaints.
Okay.
One was a traffic accident when I was a P2, and then I never got a sustained complaint until I was a sergeant. It was like, okay, and then I got a second one as a sergeant. But the traffic accident was kind of funny. Just on a side note,
Yeah.
I'm driving. I'm working in North Hollywood. I'm working with a guy from New York. Funny New York character, kind of like a Goodfellas accent.
There's always a couple of those on the job.
This guy just laughed nonstop. So we're see this car darting in and out of traffic, and he runs the plate and he goes, "Hey, this car's coming back to a Lexus, but it's a Honda." And so immediately I'm like, "Hey, run the plate again, just double check." But the guy pulls over real quick and stops. So I stop behind him, offset, keeping my eyes on the car. I'm telling my partner, "Hey, run the plate again before we put anything out."
Yeah.
But I kick my door open because you want to be ready, and there goes a car. It's my door. So I look over at my partner, and he's laughing. He's like, "Hey, sorry, bro, I ran the plate wrong." I'm like, "You know what? Go up and tell this guy it's his lucky day. Whatever he's doing, speeding around out here, we no longer are interested in stopping him." So the captain at that time at North Hollywood gave me a 1-day suspension, and then he told my lieutenant, I feel really bad about giving Bogart a suspension day because he had such a great attitude. He was so humble about taking it. And I was thinking to myself, well, it's probably not too late. But so that was it. And then I had.
Before we go any further, I got to make a joke out of that. So if that was me with my partner working again, hey, bro, run the plate.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? Run the plate.
Right.
And run it.
Yeah.
Until you get it right. Sorry, I was just thinking about that. Just, God,
Yeah, he
on the
should've-
job you have, humor is the best remedy when you do this type of work. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that was my one and only sustained complaint until
You made sergeant.
I made sergeant 2012.
Okay.
I got a complaint in. So I'm working Newton Division. Mm-hmm. It's New Year. I'm working patrol. It's New Year's Eve. So now it's New Year's Day at like 3 a.m.
Okay.
So I get a supervisor request over at Adams and Hooper. Very narrow streets, gang neighborhood. 3 o'clock in the morning
Okay.
after New Year's Eve. What do you think my biggest concern is?
Yes. All this
DUI
stuff is,
drivers out there,
yes,
right? So I pull up, and these officers have the car stopped in the center. There's a center like lane. There's one lane on each side, east west on on Adams, and the black and white's got a car stopped in the center of the road. I'm looking around. There's some people on the sidewalk. So I go up. The guy says, "Hey, Sarge, we've got 2 people in the back car. There's a female adult that's very angry, just yelling and stuff from the back seat." And so I'm thinking to myself, I think, what, I don't want my guys or anybody or myself getting rear-ended out here.
Right.
I asked the officers, hey, do you have them arrested? Are you going to take them to jail before I talk to them? He says, yeah, they're going to jail. I've got open charges on them, right? So I said, all right, you know what, then let's just do this at the station. There's no need for me to listen to her bitch and moan out here on the street.
Right.
And risk, life and limb. So it was more of a tactical decision to take it back to the station.
Okay.
And there I can do a controlled interview, not a big deal. So we do that. And also gives her a chance to kind of like simmer down a little bit. So
Yeah.
Do that kind of now that things are quieted down. The officer comes to me and he says, hey, Sarge, that woman that wants, that's upset, we're going to let her go. Turns out her sister's using her name, and that's why she's got these warrants. It's not actually hers. We ran her cheers, and we've vetted out that we determined it's not her.
Did further investigation, it wasn't her.
Yeah, so, hey, even better, because now she's got the reason to be happy, right?
Yeah.
So I go over, explain to her, and she's just kind of like, whatever, you know what, I'm over this. I just want to go home.
Okay.
Anything you want to talk to me about? No, just want to get out of here. Not an uncommon response to people's complaints. Didn't make any allegations of complaints. So I said, all right, send her outside.
She gets released.
So she walks from the station, which is on Central Avenue. Hooper and Adams is not that far. So she decides to walk back to the house. Well, this is her boyfriend's parents' house. He's staying in jail because he's got a parole hold. Well, his family's very upset with her, blaming her for getting him arrested. So they lock her out. She walks back to the station, comes back to the lobby. She's making a big scene in the lobby. My AWC, a Sergeant 2, says, hey, you know what, I'll handle this. Let me go talk to her. So he goes out there, talks to her, comes back in, tells me, hey, put in your log, see watch commander's log, and I'm going to document the whole thing.
Right. Your AWC, your assistant watch commander.
Right. So, which, by the way, this guy's now a Captain 3 somewhere,
Okay.
still working. Hey, things work out for him, right? So, I had no reason not to trust him, and it is what it is.
Right.
She goes home. A couple days later, calls IA duty line, makes a complaint, saying that the initial stop, the guys didn't have PC, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
It gets adjudicated, unfounded, or unfounded.
Okay.
The guys had PC, all that good stuff.
Okay.
But they sustain 2 counts of failing to take a complaint for me and the AWC.
Okay.
So the captain calls me in, and this captain was a good guy. He's a good leader. He's since retired, moved back to the East Coast. He says, hey, I sustained this, it holds up my log. He's like, there's nothing in here, for me to go off of. to support your actions. I said, okay, the AWC took his, he said he was going to handle it, whatever. So he gives me an OR,
Right. So that was that's an
official reprimand.
official reprimand.
For
It's kinda
me
like,
and the AWC.
got it.
So it's
For the
like,
assistant watch commander.
listen, I'll be the first one to learn a lesson. And clearly, under the circumstances, the way that this is, I should have taken a complaint and just been left it open. So when she came back, then they could have just, sized them up and went on, right? So,
Right.
which is what I did going forward, if that ever presented itself where somebody said, I want to make a complaint. No, I don't want to make a complaint. I'm out of here. Whatever, right?
Yeah. So that's the lessons learned.
Right. So lesson learned there. Then the captain calls me like right before Christmas and says, hey, I got some bad news. Chief Beck's on vacation and the acting chief has military endorsed the complaint and it's giving you guys 5 days. So I was like, Merry Christmas.
Right. So, and just so it may interject. So, military endorsement for all those who are listening and watching is it's a military term that we use to say that the next level of review actually changed their mind and decided to give you a greater penalty, if you will, in this case. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was kind of like my TC. It was like, it is what it is. It's pretty heavy for a first time. I know a couple of sergeants, know quite a few sergeants that have several similar complaints where they're all ORs. So I guess maybe just timing wise or I don't know. At the end of the day, I got 5 days. The AWC got 5 days, and it was a good lesson for me moving on. Mm-hmm. I took my lumps and moved on. So that was my first ever sustained complaint. At that time,
that was 2012,
like 15,
right?
16 years on, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then, so anyway, I ended up transferring to North Hollywood for some personal reasons. My kids came to live with me full time, and it was very convenient for me to work there at North Hollywood. So this is the one. This next complaint is kind of funny, but there's a good lesson here in hope, right? And in why our system works, and why we're so lucky actually to have built in our charter the procedural remedies for some of these outcomes, right? So I'm working North Hollywood, I'm working patrol. And as a sergeant, you spend a lot of time sitting in the car, just, you get bored. There's a car double parked in this area of North Hollywood that's kind of a busy, high traffic volume area. So I decided, and there's nobody in the car, double parked there, no flashers, nothing on. So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna stretch my legs, just see what this car's doing here. Okay. So I get out, see a car's running, it's got Oregon plates on it. A guy comes out carrying a couple of guitar cases. He says, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me move the car. Hey, no problem, man. You know what? He goes, can I just load some equipment in real quick? I said, yeah, absolutely. So he's loading his stuff in. While I'm standing there on the sidewalk, back against the wall, this woman in a Suburban drives up in front of me, and she starts screaming out her window. Hey, you got to stop this guy behind me. He's stalking me. I got a restraining order against him. Blah, blah, blah. So I'm thinking, whoa, okay. And she's probably like a middle-aged, maybe, kind of looks like maybe like probably a Rough Rider back in her days, kind of little high mileage, more worse for the wear, in like kind of an old beat-up Suburban. And I look back, and I say that it's important because I look back and I see this young, hipster-looking guy, probably in his early 20s, looking at me like, I have no idea who this person is.
Got it.
And looking at the sizing it up, I'm like, this just doesn't match up. So I said, you got a copy of that restraining order? She's like, no, I don't have a copy, but maybe it's not him, but it might be one of his posse. So as soon as she says this, I'm like, this lady's crazy. Like, this kid's off. This is like a road rage thing or something, right? So I said, hey, you just keep driving. You're holding up traffic. She starts yelling at me, screaming. There's a guy behind me says, yeah, he's like, I honked my horn. She cut me off, and I don't know her, whatever. So she gets out of the Suburban, walks up to me on the sidewalk, gets in my face and says, you need to stop him. You need to arrest him, or I'm going to go to your station. I'm going to complain about you. So I said, you know what? I got no probable cause to even detain this person. No reasonable suspicion, let alone probable cause to arrest them, right? I said, listen, just go back to your car, get on with your day. And she goes, well, I'm going to go and complain. And I said, you know what, be my guest. I mean, what am I going to say? Just get the traffic. My thing is get the traffic moving, right? So she jumps in her car, speeds off. So I asked the guy from Oregon. He was like a young musician guy. I said, hey, man, let me get your name. And she makes a complaint. I'll have you as a witness. This was pre-body worn. So absolutely, that lady's insane. You handle that amazing. Mm-hmm. Fast forward about 4 hours. I don't hear anything like come to the station, meet with the watch commander, nothing. So I'm thinking like, she just went on with her life, right? So at North Hollywood, the watch commander's office, and there's a restroom on the other side, in between's behind the front desk area. Uh-huh. So I walk in the watch commander's office and I go over to the restroom, use the restroom. And as I'm walking back, I can see the lobby at North Hollywood, and there's nobody in it. And there's no officers at the desk, and I'm just walking through to go back toward the watch commander's office, and I see it's the lady from the Suburban in the lobby. Wow. Right? Okay. So I'm thinking to myself, whatever, she's here. So she sees me and she goes, oh, excuse me, and walks, and I'm like, she walks towards me and stops this close as we are now. She says, hey, I want to make a complaint. This effing officer, out here. And I was like, oh, yeah? Really? Huh, that's interesting. So, okay. And I'm just listening to her going off. And then finally I go, all right, so what this guy look like? And she looks down at my name tag, and then she looks at me, she goes, oh, wait a minute, it was you. Wow. And I'm trying not to bust up laughing, right? Because I think this is ridiculous. I know, like we work in an environment that is semi-permissible, right? It's funny, but it's also can be dangerous, right?
Of course, absolutely.
So you got to take the laughs, right? That's what I'm thinking. Like that's whatever. You know what? It is what it is. So there's sergeants over here. They're laughing their ass off. And I said, hey, can somebody go talk to this lady? She wants to make a complaint. Guy goes out, takes a complaint from her. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to be big nothing. Comes back, unfounded.
Okay.
All right. Somebody didn't like that up the chain. Comes back, actions could have been different.
Okay.
You shouldn't have been talking to her.
Got
you should
it.
have immediately known you're the subject of the complaint, whatever. Okay, fair enough. I'll buy that. Goes up. I'm sorry. So about 6 months later, it comes back and it's sustained. Now it's out of statute. So apparently it went downtown, and somebody down there said that it couldn't be classified the way it was, and they were going to sustain it as as a paper penalty because it's now out of statute. So 3 counts of discourtesy.
Okay.
Which I forget where they got the counts
down.
from, I mean, it was just such a joke, right? So 3 counts of discourtesy. So I say all that to say this. So we have a process. We have due process, okay? You have there's a form of appeal. So when there's no punitive penalty, meaning you're not taking any pay cut.
Correct.
You can have an administrative appeal.
Yes.
So I opt for an administrative appeal. I have the administrative appeal. The appeals the board members,
the hearing
officers side for me. It goes up now. At that time, it's still that way today. But
it's not binding.
It's not binding with the chief of police, meaning he doesn't have to accept the findings of the hearing member.
Of the hearing officer.
And at that time, Chief Beck was like, he's like, I've already heard it once, so he didn't. He's just whatever. He's like,
they don't overturn them.
He didn't overturn it, right?
Got it.
So I said, well, it doesn't end there. You know what? I asked for a writ.
A writ, an appeal.
And we had a writ, went through the league, and we filed a writ with Superior Court. About a year later, the city attorney, my lawyer calls me and says, hey, the city attorney called and was like, why is this even in my office? Which happens many times.
Yes.
There's a lot of...
I know we're laughing about it, but it is true.
But at the end of the day, you know what? They came back to me and they said, hey, we'll go with the original hearing officer's opinion and their findings. And I said, that's all I ever wanted.
Yes.
And I said, you know what? I had my day, and I said all that to say this is that, if you're a young officer out there, if you're a sergeant, an employee within the organization, in particular with the Los Angeles Police Department, know you have an outlet either through an administrative appeal hearing, through an opted board of rights, through whatever the case may be. There's nothing wrong with taking your lumps and like I did in that first complaint that I explained. When you're wrong, and there's something to be learned from it. But if you feel that you're getting the short end of the stick because the administration or someone within the organization has weaponized this complaint system, you have an outlet.
Yeah.
And there is hope for you. And it is a just system. It really is. We are lucky that we have that. Excuse me, I'm no longer part of the organization.
We will always be.
But the members of the Los Angeles Police Department are very fortunate to have the system that they do.
Yeah, no, you know what, Todd? Very well said. I got so much to follow up and say. The first thing I would say is, it's not even what I said. I actually want to ask you, who failed in this? Where was the flaw, in your opinion? And I'm talking about this complaint where you had 3 counts of discourtesy. And as it goes through all these levels of review, and I get that, I'm with you. We are lucky to have all this. But like one of my former guests said it best, the outcome was right after what you went through. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
The outcome was right.
Yeah.
Even in your first one with the traffic collision.
Right.
The outcome was right. You took the penalty and you moved on, right? But it's the process that seems to be where you get penalized. And that's, in my opinion, where that stigma kind of sticks. Because if we're going to spend all these levels of review and actually go to an outside court to follow writ of mandate and have a judge, which, by the way, not many judges are very welcome, I should say. They're very comfortable. That's the best way to explain it. To tell a chief of police of a municipality that, hey, you know what, you kind of got it wrong. So I'm making this decision for you. Most of the time in writs, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of judges don't like telling a chief of police what to do. And I feel for you because, again, we can have some humor about it, but man, somewhere in there, the department failed.
Yeah, and back to your comment about the judges, they don't want to see this stuff come across their bench. They don't want to have to weigh in on
the
a
decision
chief's
making.
business.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So I think their expectation would be for these chiefs, or to make to be more fair. I mean, you have a committee, and most of these board members or hearing officers they're attorneys. They have a subject matter expertise in law, and we're just ignoring it in many cases.
Yeah.
In my case here, where we really failed, and I think we fail our officers as an organization, is we lose sight of the why we're there in the first place, right? Yes. So when I say we, speaking from the position through the lenses of internal affairs, why they're there, they lose track of it, and they start to focus on little things that don't matter. Yes. Instead of really, when we changed our complaint intake form from the 181 to the 128, right?
Correct.
So when I first came on the 181, there was more discretion. They could objectively look at something and then make a determination whether it was going to rise to the level of a formal investigation, or it can be documented in a fact sheet, or with some informal counseling. Yeah.
So and I'll stop you there because I was just well educated about how this all changed from 181 to 128. The Rampart scandal is the founding father of not having IA be involved at all, meaning you had discretion to walk in a station and some sergeant listens to you and says, okay, yeah, well, thanks, and whatever.
Right.
Make it go away, or tell your lieutenant or your watch commander, and it gets documented, have a nice day. It's almost as if, it's kind of like saying that internal affairs didn't really exist. back in the early 90s, mid 90s, up until, I want to say when Chief Parks became chief, 1997, is that correct?
Parks, yes.
So the Special Order 1 was the change to a Form 181. That 181 that you're talking about has everything to do that, regardless of whatever type of allegation or whatever complaint someone has, especially the public, you shall document it. You shall take it, right? And that's your job.
Right, they took all the discretion away.
They took all the discretion away.
Right, and I understand in the big picture, you know, the 30,000-foot picture.
Yes.
It looks really good, right? Because you're saying, hey, let's just take away that subjectiveness, and let's put that in the hands of somebody at a higher level of review.
Correct.
Right, and I think that adds a lot of legitimacy to the outcomes, right?
Absolutely.
Because what it is, yeah, you're right. A sergeant can come in now. That sergeant may say like have, you know, like no. Have a historical knowledge of maybe a family dispute where they know the parties and they're like, hey, we can handle this way, and everybody's cool with that. But at the end of the day, you really need some legitimacy in those higher levels of review, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with it. The problem in the design is that, and I saw this, like you're watering down the effectiveness of the 128, right? It's because the weight of it is collapsing under itself. So I was just talking to somebody about this. They said, well, you know, LAPD and how was that? What I said, listen, when you're at LAPD, it's not uncommon if you're working gangs, if you're a young officer, to have 5, I've seen 10 open complaints.
Yes.
Do you think, like, what is that? Do these officers, they don't really care how many, there's so many.
Yes.
They've become ineffectual in terms of like deterring maybe behavior that you want to
Correct.
Address, right?
Yes.
And that's the problem. So if it was refined to focus on more of areas of specificity as opposed to just this big blanket general, you know, we'll take anything or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and going back to the lady on the thing, I mean, this was just, I was just a victim of circumstances. She just happened to be passing by me at that time, right? She never came to the hearing. She had there's no truth to anything she said. My witness was, so I had actually several witnesses that came forward.
Yeah. She was invested.
Yeah.
She didn't have a vested interest.
But really, what does it matter? I mean, we addressed it. We found there's no legitimacy to it.
Right.
You can see that right on the surface level.
Yes.
It doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out. And really, it's not affecting anybody. If anything, the effects I had positively on community members were with those people that she was influencing through her negative behavior within the community as an out of control citizen.
Yeah.
So, you know, imagine if I wasn't there and she gets out and starts going off on this guy behind her, or she does it. I mean, we see it time and time again.
Yep.
I don't want to get too far off track, but that's just one example of really where the system, while you have to be patient, it will work for you at the end.
Yes.
I believe it.
I believe it too. Lessons learned, as far as I'm concerned, and maybe you can echo on this, is the fact that, you know what, when you have a big machine like this, sometimes there's some flaws, right? There is mistakes where we don't really put a really good eye and do a full analysis, and to say that, particularly in your case, that no, this is not, this should be unfounded, right?
Right.
And that's just, those are the kind of, those are the consequences that come with such a big operating machine, because I almost feel like we are to be held accountable because of our past, right? We had the Rampart scandal. We had to come up with legitimacy, like you mentioned. We had to be part of this consent decree, which changed a 181 to a 128. So guess what? Now we have to be even more professional. We have to be more accountable. And guess what? Now we need more resources, because we are taking every single complaint. We're going to make sure we record every single complaint. We're going to make sure that we are wrapping ourselves around that complainant and ensuring that we are getting to the bottom of the truth. So I'm with you on that. Anything you can add as far as lessons learned from this incident?
No, I think I really like how you put that last, perspective on it. We don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face.
There
right?
you go. Amen to that.
And so at the end of the day, let's just try to, I would hope that this next generation, that they really focus on really developing the employees instead of just throwing, just burning them down.
Yeah.
Just burning them down for the sake of burning them down.
Yeah. Amen to
Don't
that.
lose perspective at what the big mission is.
Yeah. Well, good. Okay, Bogey. Now we're in the segment of worst and best. So, tell me about worst. I suppose radio call or service call or something that happened in your career that you can think of.
Yeah,
and touch on.
I mean, this call really there's a call that I'll never forget. I mean, it's the worst. It haunts me to this day. I was working Newton. I was a P3. I was working with a P2.
Okay.
I had about a little less time on than me.
So you were a field training officer and you're working with a
But,
police officer.
Yeah, just working with like a regular partner, not a trainee.
Okay.
And I always like to do books.
Okay.
Guys like to drive, and I would always like to do books.
So he's driving and you're the one doing the log and
So
doing
my
the
partner's,
books.
yeah, he's driving, and we jump in the car. It's day watch early, 7:30. Jump in the car. Tell him, hey, you know what? You want to drive? I'm gonna do books. Get in, log on. One of the first units to log on. Right as we're leaving the station, hot shot comes out. Kidnapping in progress on an elementary school. I want to say it was like 49th Street between Central and Hooper.
Okay.
South of the station. So it's code 3 run. The comments are a male is kidnapping an adult female who's a kindergarten teacher from the location. Several witnesses are calling, screaming can be heard in the background, the whole 9 yards, right?
Okay.
So I jump in the car, I'm like, hey, let's go. Take off code 3 southbound Central Avenue. And my partner makes a right turn onto Vernon going west. And I say, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? You're going the wrong way, man. It's east of Central. It's
Right.
between. This is like basic geography in that division.
Right.
And I'm thinking, man, I don't know if he's having a bad day or what. Like, he should know better. I'm just like, hey, turn around, man. Hit McKinley, go south. Let's get back on track. So we lost like a minute by the time it took him to turn around, get back on, or maybe, less than a minute. And so we pull up there. There's people outside. He just left. He dragged her, took her through the alley. You just missed them, like seconds. And so we take off, kind of set up a quick search, like try to get a little containment, but he was out of there. So run the name of the victim. She's a teacher at this school. Comes back with a restraining order. The restraining order's got a named suspect and an address in Southeast Division, down off Imperial Highway down in Watts. So I immediately get on the phone with the watch commander at Southeast. This is from the field. This is early days of cell phones, but I called directly to the Southeast watch commander. Hey, can you send a car to this address over on Imperial Highway right now for this kidnap suspect? The guy goes, wait a minute, what'd you say? What was that address? Puts me on hold. I'm like, uh-oh, that doesn't sound, something's weird already. He gets back on the phone. It's a different guy. Hey, this is Sergeant so-and-so. What do you need? I tell him. He goes, yeah, we got units there. We got a double homicide at that location.
Oh, man.
So I said, he goes, yeah, this guy killed his mom and his dad. It took off in their car. I said, well, he just came and kidnapped his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend who had a restraining order against. Yeah. She's a regular, citizen, just, kindergarten teacher. This guy's a straight killer at this point.
Yeah.
So I'm already like, this is developing into something really, really big. Detectives come in, our special investigation section, SIS, RHD, the kidnapping folks. He has her for a couple of days, and I'm tracking this. Every time I come into work, what's going on? Have they found her? Have they found her? Have they found her? 2 patrol officers in Southeast Division are staking out a house where this suspect has a contact. Car pulls up. They see her in the car. He gets out, goes inside, comes back out. They start following, and he pulls out. He's going like 5 miles per hour northbound Main Street. They say he stops at a red light, reaches over, shoots her in the head, the victim. Kills her right in front of the police officers that are following him. An officer-involved shooting ensues. The suspect's taken into custody. He's wounded, survives. She's killed. She tried to jump out right there, tried to escape. And so to me, I went down, I was on duty. I went down there to Southeast. I went to the hospital because I wanted to see this guy in the hospital and just what pure evil looks like, you know?
Yeah.
And
Wow.
saw him laying there on the gurney, about 140 pounds, skinny, shaking because he was cold, and just thinking to myself, like, wow, that's just pure evil, what that looks like. But why that haunts me, why that'll always stick with me, obviously, like, why'd you take that right turn on Vernon, man? I mean, it was seconds that made the difference.
Yeah.
And it always, like, stuck with me. And I didn't want to blame that guy, man, like, but in my back of my head, like, you know, what if we would have just continued on course? Could we have got there?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Made it, you know, intervene. And unfortunately, she lost her life, and that'll always stick with me. That'll be my, you know, one of those horror stories that we have, you know, from our
that we have to live with, you know, and move on. So
Yeah.
okay, well, we got rid of that part. Let's go to the best. I
Yeah,
know you got a good
the
one.
best, I mean, I would say the best. I had a lot of great, you know, a lot of great onesies, you know, making sergeant, having my kids there on promotion day, like all
that's
that
awesome.
kind of stuff. But you know what? The best times that I remember, most rewarding for me, was anytime anyone that I ever was able to help get like ahead, either get a job, get a P3 promotion, study for the sergeant's test. That's really those were my best days, you know. And you know, I remember one guy, he was trying so hard to make P3, you know, and he would stay over
P3 that's a field training officer.
for a field training officer, you know, and he, you know, we had this interview process for
Yes.
this position. It's a very subjective position.
Oh,
but
we've been there.
Very hard to get, you know, that and Sergeant too, right?
Yes, I've been there.
And you know, he tried, you know, multiple times, and you know, finally he didn't give up. He didn't quit, and he'd stay with me after work, and we would sit in the and just, you know, do mock interviews, and I'd helped him study, and he got the spot, you know, and he finally got it, and you know, those were the rewarding.
That's awesome.
Those were the rewards, man. Like just seeing those guys promote. So
That's how I definitely like to close the episode. T Boogie, my man, my dude. Hey, so tell me, I'll give you the floor again, man. Anything you'd like to tell whoever's watching, listening, a young officer, maybe even a sergeant that's promoting, or a field training officer, or P3 that we refer to sergeant. Any parting words? Any advice you can give?
have a lot of patience, and you know, and just have that never give up spirit. You know, when it comes to these complaints, there's nothing wrong with admitting you're wrong, and taking your lumps and taking your lessons.
Yes.
You know, I think in society now, there's a general lack of like ownership, you know, and taking
Accountability.
responsibility,
That's right.
accountability. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you know, I'm older. I grew up as a kid in the 70s, 80s, and, you know, and I've been beaten up on the playground, and you just, dang, you know, you take your lumps and you move on. And the next day or later that afternoon, you're friends with them again, or
That's
you're
right.
playing like that. You just got to, you know, don't be afraid to admit you're wrong and to move on. In that same breath, though, when you know that you haven't done anything wrong and you believe that you have a good explanation for what you've done, don't be afraid to articulate, to seek a procedural remedy, to ask for advice, and to just, you know, look at it as in the long haul. Especially, you know, with these use of force findings.
Yes.
And pursuit findings, you can have administrative appeal hearings for those. And I recommend, you know, if you feel that you were wronged, exercise your remedies. You know, look for those administrative appeal hearings, and opted border rights. You know, use those outlets to you, because our system is built on due process, and it does work if you let it.
That's right. Well, on that note, we're going to close it, you know, wrap it up. And definitely don't forget to push the like button, subscribe, share it, and download it. And again, Todd, thank you for coming. And on that note, please be safe, and don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.